So for this panel, this one is a little bit of a shorter session, and we really want to use this opportunity to deep dive into the hospitality sector in particular, to give us kind of an opportunity to unpack some of the more specific challenges and opportunities. So we have two lovely panelists here with us today that are going to tell us a little bit more about their own experiences within this sector. And hopefully we can turn some of the more kind of abstract theoretical things we've been talking about in some of the other panels to more practical advice. So maybe if I'll give you just a couple of minutes to introduce yourselves first.
Okay. I'm Michelle Mason. I work for the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance. And just to give you a brief intro as to what the Alliance does, we are a convening organisation. We bring together CEOs and C-suites and member partners to achieve sustainability practice. Our affiliate members consist of real estate owners, investment funds, technology companies, procurement specialists, legal and consulting firms. Currently at the moment we have over 300 donor members. That is 7 million rooms globally and over 50 strategic partners. Those numbers will really, as we carry on talking, you'll get a real understanding, because currently the hospitality industry is at a development growth not seen before, from my understanding. I'll hand you.
Thank you. So I'm Samah, Abassi. Is my mic on? It is now, okay. I lead the human rights team at Intercontinental Hotel Group. I'll keep it very brief. I'm sure many of you are familiar with our brands, but we are one of the world's leading hotel companies. We have 19 brands with over 6,000 hotels in approximately 100 countries.
Great, thank you so much. For this session, I think we specifically chose the hospitality industry because in the hotel sector especially, there's a certain level of distance, or there can be a certain level of distance between the employer and the employees through the use of agencies or through a franchise model, and a lot of potential for a kind of more hidden workforce. I really wanted to start by getting your perspective on this and how you think hotel companies are ensuring that workers are, first of all, recruited safely and that their rights continue to be respected throughout the process. And also if you can reflect on whether this is accounted for differently across different kind of contexts in different countries or regions or cultures, or however you may see it.
Okay, I'll go first. So within the industry, they take a range of initiatives. So many companies adhere to, obviously, the international standards. We talk about policies, for instance, the United Nations Guiding Principles on Human Rights, the International Labour Organization, the Global Code of Ethics for Tourism, and tourism organizations. Hotel chains develop and enforce supplier codes of conduct that require suppliers to follow ethical practices, and also look at fair wages, working hours for employees, also safe working conditions and non-discrimination. Some hotel or companies have their own ethical recruitment policies, and these include the standard of no fees, transparent contracts, fair recruitment processes. And also with this, the industry, their training both managers and staff is critical and crucial, so that employees know about their rights, ethical recruitment practices, and also ways to report abuse. And many of the companies have third-party audits, certification, and ensure compliance with the labour standards. And the training part is really key for managers as well as staff.
Thank you.
So I'll briefly tell you how we're doing it at IHG. We first started looking at this issue in a, I guess, much more intentional, meaningful way in about sort of 2018, 2019. This was identified as a salient issue for us in a sort of global risk assessment. At that point, we just didn't really understand the nature of the risk, so partnered with an external consultancy to do some in-country assessments. So in some countries like Oman, we went in and visited hotels, did worker interviews, engaged with stakeholders and hotel management, did that in a couple of other countries. partnered with organisations like the IOM to feed into projects that were looking at migration corridors. I think one was Filipino workers coming into the Gulf, which our hotels participated in. And there was a huge amount of work in the run-up to the Qatar World Cup, a lot of auditing and a lot of capability building. All of that, we identified sort of risks through all of those different assessments, and they all led to the development of a set of standards that we call the responsible labour requirements, but essentially minimum standards for our hotels that we manage across a number of topics. So recruitment, I'm going to get this wrong now, but recruitment and employment, worker voice, accommodation, and working with third-party labour providers and recruitment agencies. So a sort of a range of issues. And they focus on recruitment risks, but also risks throughout employment also. So I think what we've done over the last couple of years is really focused on trying to make sure that we've got the right standards in place. We've had a long-standing commitment to human rights for, I don't know since when, for years. I think what we realised was that high-level commitment to no forced labour or no worker should pay a fee was quite abstract for hotels. And so we recognised the need to develop operational sort of guidance to turn that high-level commitment into a series of sort of instructions, essentially, for hotels to follow to make sure that the risks were identified and addressed. So we're in about year 2 of implementation. It's going well. There are challenges. The maturity of implementation varies across regions. We do have some regional variation in the standards, but we've really tried hard to keep a baseline that's consistent. And where we're trying to focus on now is how do we measure the success of the implementation of those standards. We're relying on self-assessments at the moment, but we all know the shortcomings of self-assessment. So we're hoping to do some in-country validation this year, so visiting some of our higher risk markets and engaging with workers to understand their experiences. But that's not scalable or sustainable for us. We can't visit 6,000 hotels every single year forever. So we need to also consider what are the other ways that we can, assess implementation that sits sort of in between self-assessment and on-site validation. And the other thing we're really trying to better understand is just more about the risk. Like, how does that risk actually, what does it look like in different regions? What is our exposure to the risk? We're a very decentralized business, so just getting basic data on how many migrant workers our hotels actually employ, where they're coming from, whether they stay in staff accommodation provided by the hotel or third party, all of that basic data is sitting in 6,000 different places. Right. So we're really trying to build our capability and our capacity at the central level to have more oversight and more centrally collected data.
Thank you, that's really interesting. One of our cross-cutting themes, as most of you know, for this forum has been looking specifically at the case of women migrant workers. They're obviously more vulnerable by virtue of having the kind of triple low-wage migrant and being women. So I wonder how you account for that risk specifically, if at all.
So what a lot of the industry are doing are taking gender-specific provisions within their policies and their supplier code of conduct. So looking at the prohibition of discrimination based on gender, outlining measurements to protect female workers from exploitation and abuse. These can include female workers, for example, ensuring that they receive the same salary as their male counterparts for performing the same tasks, risk assessing, looking at their policies for a gendered lens, also looking at how promotion and hiring happens, ensuring that there are women in leadership positions, and also looking at, when you look at your policies and your procedures and your promotions, who's not in the room and how can we get them in the room, and what support can be done to bring women along this journey as well. Also, guidelines about preventing and addressing sexual harassment and other forms of gender violence. So there are systems in place and developing trust within your female cohort to what do you do when you want to report sexual harassment at work? Are those mechanisms working correctly? Have they been checked? And do they understand that they can report it? Those are some of the procedures that they're taking. And the key thing, again, is training, is instilling in the workforce that, to get an understanding of what this looks like and how it can be addressed, and looking at the education of employees and management within these systems is so key, because often these women workers, as the hospitality industry is expanding, we're going to be more reliant on migrant workers, more reliant on women coming into the industry who are vulnerable, and often these vulnerabilities and these abuses happen prior to them getting into the workforce. So you're looking at working with civil society, local community groups, as well as promoting so that women are more educated when coming into these positions.
Thank you.
My answer is going to be very short. We haven't done a huge amount of work on this. I think in a sort of broader workforce perspective, there's a huge amount of work going on to look at sex discrimination and some of the things that Michelle's been talking about. But in terms of our work to address migrant worker risk, I think our initial focus was to just establish like a floor, like minimum standards that would apply to, in the context of recruitment and employment of all migrant workers, and we've been so focused on just making sure that they are well understood, that we've got training on that we've got resources for our hotels, like we've got remediation guidance, interview templates, due diligence checklists, like all of the supporting stuff. I'm really hoping that going forward we can start looking at this aspect in a bit more detail, particularly with our on-site visits later this year. I think we're going to try and integrate some of that into the assessment, but no, it hasn't been a focus for us, and partly also because we just don't have I couldn't tell you right now what proportion of our migrant workforce is women. We're starting to collect that data this year. I'm really interested to see what it shows us, but yeah, I think going forward we'll take more of a look at this.
Thank you. I just want to ask one last question before we open up in case there are any other questions coming through. But just in the spirit of, we've been talking quite a bit today about collaboration and the need for more of it across all kind of sectors and disciplines. I wonder for you, from the hospitality sector perspective, what kind of collaboration you feel you need, or what kind of support you need from other stakeholder groups and from each other to kind of continue furthering the responsible recruitment and responsible business agendas.
Sorry, I took a breath at the same time.
It's okay, we both took a breath at the same time. I mean, collaboration is really key, and at the Alliance we work really strongly. Our focus is on collaboration. It's collaborating with members. We have working groups and committees. We work with IOM around looking at safer migration corridors. We work around specific topics that are industry focused to help the industry have a collaborative voice in how they go forward with the work. I mean, when we talk about recruitment agencies, we all know there are recruitment agencies out there that will not change their practice, and then how does that look like, and what can the industry do with a collaborative voice in working with us, and work our partnerships and collaborations with organisations like IOM, and looking at how we work together with local government, and looking at encouraging rather than cutting off, because with encouraging to change rather than we're not going to work with them anymore, that kind of attitude.
Such a long list of things that we would like to have. We have some amazing partnerships. We partner with the IOM, and they provide us with invaluable guidance on all of this work. We collaborate with our peers. I think we take a very open approach to engaging with civil society stakeholders. We'd like to see them as critical friends, so open to any more wanting to talk to us. What we'd like to see more of, I think, collaboration between our industry and other industries. We're quite insular at the moment. We have not been doing this for very long. I'd say the maturity of implementation of the guiding principles is fairly low in our industry compared to other industries. There's been a very long and perhaps in some ways disproportionate focus on single topics like human trafficking for a very long time. We're still trying to sort of get the message out that human rights is about so much more than that. Okay, let me get to the other things. So working with other industries, having more access to data and collaborating in a slightly different way. And what I mean by that is we do a really good job of working, with the SHA and our peers on developing resources and guidance and taking part in pilot projects. But actually, I think one of the earlier speakers today said something that really resonated with me, which is probably going to get it really wrong, but something along the lines of like real collaboration is working in a specific place on a specific issue to address something. And I think we haven't quite got there yet with our industry. I'd love to be, when we have issues arise, I'd love to be working with our peers, for example, and taking collective action to build the capabilities of high-risk suppliers. Or if we have, cases where remediation is required, collectively working on that. So moving away from just developing resources and guidance to actually sort of collaborating on action. And the data piece is really, I've heard a couple of times over the last couple of days, things like if there isn't evidence of workers paying recruitment fees, just find out what the average is for that migration corridor. And I'm like, where is this information? What do you mean just find out? We are a very small team, and in our industry, we're very lucky. A lot of our peers have, one person or half person doing human rights work. So at IHRB, we've invested in a human rights team, which we're very grateful for. But we don't have the time to go and do a huge amount of research on trying to identify what the average recruitment fees and costs are from Myanmar to Thailand, for example. We don't know where to get that information readily, apart from IOM, who we have on speed dial, it seems. Certainly at the hotel level, some hotels have a big HR department, some don't. Some have like one person doing a bit of procurement, a bit of HR, and a bit of management. Like, how on earth are they supposed to understand the risks related to the corridor that most of their migrant workers are coming from? So I don't know where all of this information is. I know some of the consultancies and specialists in the room have it. I'd love to see more open source data on this that is easily accessible to companies, because when we are trying to target our due diligence efforts, it's really difficult in the absence of that data. Or if it's behind you have to pay for it, or it's behind some kind of, you have to join a membership organization. We just need access to the data so we can start doing this work. So a bit more of that would be nice.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I just wanted to see if there are any questions. There are.
Okay, sorry for the mic stuff, but two questions. One is a follow-up for you, Tamara, from the last session, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Are there any specific efforts to abolish the kafala system that you can speak about? And then another question's on hotels using agencies for day workers. Are hotels doing due diligence on these day agencies that hire, short-term day workers? Can you speak about that? Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. I guess just on the kafala system, even though that relates to the last panel, I'm not privy to that kind of information at the moment. There are waves of labor reforms supposed to happen in Saudi Arabia, and if they were to model themselves after the Qatari system, then you can expect them to abolish the kafala system. But again, the real question is not whether it's going to be abolished by name, but whether that kind of thing will be properly implemented and accounted for in the long term, because it's one thing to have it kind of crossed off the list of things that are allowed in the country, but it's another thing for them to actually go after the people who continue to uphold this system, especially when it's benefiting the state. I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, and I know it was related to the last session, but it's a real issue for us for operating in that area, and we know from a lot of our risk assessments that it has been abolished in a number of countries, but civil society reports indicate that it continues and it persists. So we make it really clear in our internal policies that people should have freedom of movement and be able to transfer employment without, restrictions on our part. But it's definitely still a real risk. On the second one, I think I've just learned something new looking at my team member there, but day workers, I will look into it. We work with agencies, of course. So it's a very decentralized business model that we have. We have a large number of franchised hotels, and then we manage some hotels, and there's a whole range of different types of employment setups within those. Sometimes we don't employ foreign workers directly, but in many cases we use agencies or third-party labour suppliers, and in some cases we're learning even more recently that we work on a referral system where current workers are referring friends and family from back home, and I've got to even start to think about what risks that raises beyond our visibility. But I've not come across the use of day workers, so I will look into that.
Michelle, would you like to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't come across the day workers, but there is the temporary workers that come into the industry and the agencies that are used by organisations to get these workers in. And as the industry grows, there's a clear shortage of workers, so there will be an even heavier reliance on agencies as well as migrant workers. So it is key that as an industry we ensure that due diligence checks are done regardless of what way we get the workers coming in.
Exactly, thank you. Are there any more questions, Bonnie?
Yes, there are always questions.
There always will.
But I think there's a question that's general, and I think you addressed it also in your conversation. But I think there's a real thirst for these technical knowledge on what can you do with all the franchise that you manage to scale up the adoption of the employer pays model.
Oh, you just had to leave them. So we're working on it. It's tricky. The industry as a whole has lots of different types of business models, but ours, I can give you ours as an example. So the vast majority of workers across the 6,000 hotels that we have, we do not directly employ. We employ a very small proportion, and the rest are employed by the owner of the hotel. And we essentially receive a fee from those third-party owners to have our brand on their building. And in some cases, we'll manage the hotel for them, which means that we will take care of day-to-day operations. So we have much more control and influence over, working conditions, and there's a stricter agreement in place in terms of the application of IHG policies and our code of conduct and our human rights policy and so on. With our franchised hotels, there is a sort of a separation there. We do not employ those workers, and we have some brand standards in place that govern sort of the look and the feel and the smell of the hotel and fire safety and a couple of other important areas, but don't go into employment conditions. And that's really because it creates a huge amount of legal risk for us. There's a clear separation between the owner as an employer and us as the sort of franchisor. It's been that way since the business model has existed. You see this business model in many other industries. We are, I would say, under increasing pressure to do more in this space, and so we are working with colleagues across the business and across the industry to explore what doing more looks like without creating legal risk for the company. So we're, thinking about capability building, just understanding our franchised estate a bit better. We have a lot of partners who are pretty sophisticated, will have sort of not only IHG hotels in their portfolio, but Marriott's and Hilton's and Hyatt's. So they're big management companies that are doing a lot in this space also. So just trying to understand where they are and their human rights journey, and collaborating a bit more. But it's very early days, and we're just sort of testing out a few things.
And just to pick up on that, as the Alliance, we're looking at ways of working with the industry on how we can support them in engaging these franchisees and these managed properties. So, yeah.